Good evening, I'm Megan Batchelor. Tens of thousands of 420 protesters packed Sunset Beach in the West End this afternoon. It's the first year the event has been moved from the Art Gallery Plaza, and organizers are calling it the biggest one yet. But as Brenna Rose reports, protesters weren't welcome at the new location by both the city and the park board.
They came from all over.
I'm from Alberta. I came from Edmonton for this. This is way better. Like, nobody celebrates it back home.
Tens of thousands packing Sunset Beach to spark up in sync. It's the first year the main event has been held here instead of at the Vancouver Art Gallery. And while the beach appeared to be a big hit amongst protesters and organizers,
I could not be happier today with how things have turned out. This is beyond my wildest expectations.
The location is clouded in controversy.
I wrote to the mayor on behalf of the elected Board of Commissioners, who unanimously agreed that it wasn't a good location for the event. And we asked them to work with us and find an alternate location. And so we really hope that they'll do that, because we don't want to see this coming back to Sunset Beach.
In a statement to CBC News, city officials say the 420 protest is unsanctioned and unlicensed. But the city recognizes the public's right to peaceful assembly and lawful protest. The statement goes on to say the 420 protest event has outgrown its previous location at the Vancouver Art Gallery, becoming disruptive and increasingly unsafe, and that it has worked with police and the park board on a public safety plan, but that it puts a big strain on resources. The tents and stalls may not be welcome here by the city or park board.
This is a new permanent location. We will be here every year.
But finding a solution may take a rather blunt discussion. Brenna Rose, CBC News, Vancouver.
For decades, 420 celebrations have brought a haze of pot smoke to cities across the country, around the globe, really. But in many ways, today's rallies are unique. This is the first time 420 crowds in Canada have gathered under Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who has promised to legalize marijuana. And in Vancouver, here, which some call the birthplace of the 420 rally, the masses gathered at a new location. Organizers moved this year's event from the Art Gallery Plaza to Sunset Beach in the West End. Though they were told by the city and the park board they weren't technically welcome at either spot, the tents and the stalls showed up anyway, as did tens of thousands of people.
Never experienced 420 before, so I just said come down, get out of bed and see what it's like.
I've wanted to come for 20 years. This was here to come.
It's a good medicine, and it helps me with all my anxiety, and it helps me be happy, and everybody else is happy here and here to have a good time.
I don't agree with it because I have a daughter.
It's supposed to be illegal to smoke cigarettes even there. Why are they letting them smoke pot?
I have zero concerns about having it in the neighborhood, and I have two young kids.
The one thing that has stayed the same throughout these 420 events is the need for security. And with a new location on the beach comes new challenges in keeping ralliers and locals safe. Our Brenna Rose is at Sunset Beach and joins us now. Brenna, with the 420 being at Sunset Beach, that means it's the park board's responsibility to secure the event. It said it didn't want to do that in the first place. It didn't support 420 being down there. Despite that, what is it doing to ensure that people are safe? How's that going?
Well, Dan, there's definitely a large police presence down here, depending who you ask. Police say there's between 15,000 and 20,000 people here. Organizers are estimating as many as 50,000 people. They say this is their biggest event. Now, in addition to having police officers here, there's also paramedics. The park board ensured that there is lifeguards as well down here at the beach. Now, the park board has been very vocal about not wanting to hold the event here. And going forward, they want to work with the city to make sure that it's held in another place. Now, the city has said that it's unsanctioned and it's unlicensed. In a statement to CBC, they say that it recognizes the public right to protest, but they didn't actually ask the protesters to come here. The protesters said that they wanted to hold the event here, and then going forward, the city did whatever it could to work with the park board and as well police to make sure that people here are safe. It also said in that statement that this event is a huge drain on city resources. Last year it cost the taxpayers $92,000 plus. Now here's a listen to what the park board had to say.
Well, I wrote to the mayor on behalf of the elected Board of Commissioners, who unanimously agreed that it wasn't a good location for the event. And we asked them to work with us and find an alternate location. And so we really hope that they'll do that, because we don't want to see this coming back to Sunset Beach.
Brenna, one of the other concerns was the number of young people, teenagers, youth, if you will, heading to this event, skipping school, and potentially getting their hands on a concerning amount of marijuana and edibles, etc. What's being done to keep them safe?
Well, Dan, I can tell you, I have seen a lot of teenagers down here. One individual looked to be around 15 or 16 years old. He didn't want to be filmed by our camera because he was worried about being noticed. Health officials also asked the vendors here not to sell anything to anyone under the age of 19 because they were very concerned. Now, I asked organizers what they were doing about that problem, and here's a listen to what they had to say.
I don't mind people bringing their children to this event, or there being minors here, but we're trying to discourage cannabis use among minors as much as possible. We have age limits for people using cannabis and buying it at our event, and we do the best we can.
Well, Dan, this is expected to last well into the evening. I'm told the park board will be sending a crew here bright and early in the morning to make sure that the beach is cleaned up.
A big job for sure. Brenna Rose, thank you very much. Brenna Rose at Sunset Beach for 420 tonight. Those ralliers, of course, do have a lot to celebrate today, with the federal government announcing a long-awaited timeline for their promise to legalize marijuana Canada-wide. 1 year. That's how long Justin Trudeau's government says it will take to introduce the legislation needed to legalize the drug. Between now and then, they'll tackle the complex issue of just how they will regulate production, distribution, retail, and safe use.
Our real goals around this are to make sure that we keep Canadians safe. We were interested in introducing legalization of marijuana because of the fact that we're concerned about the amount of access that kids and youth have to marijuana and how much it's being used. We're also concerned about making sure that we keep the profits out of the hands of criminals. So those are some of the things that we'll have to take into consideration.
By the spring 2017 deadline, though, the Liberals will have been in power roughly 18 months, delivering on a promise Trudeau called a top priority during the 2015 campaign. For some perspective on that, let's go to a man who's looked at the issue on a very legal level before. Jeff Plant was our former Attorney General from 2001 to 2005.
I could wish it had happened a little sooner, but the fact that we have a year means we have enough time to do the right work to make sure that the policy framework is sound and well thought through.
The Liberals' promise does bring up an interesting question for the crowds who have been celebrating 420 today. What does legal pot in 2017 mean for a rally that's made protesting for legalization a major focus? What happens when you get what you asked for?
It's a protest, but it's obviously a celebration of cannabis. There are people here very happy, selling t-shirts, selling food, all sorts of things, and celebrating together. And this happens all around the world. 420 represents a marijuana movement that goes for many decades and in every country.
We're going to leave our top story there for now, but stick with us later in our show. We'll look ahead to when that legislation is in place and when police are given the challenge of identifying and penalizing drivers who may be high.
Change is going to come, just not for another year. Today, the government said it will introduce legislation to legalize marijuana next spring. Not soon enough for some. More than 2/3 of Canadians just surveyed say marijuana should be made legal, but it's not seen as a pressing issue. In fact, more than half say it's one of the least important facing the country today. Still, there are many critics who say waiting another year is just too long. The CBC's Mira Baines has the story from Vancouver. Mira?
Diana, on the biggest day of the year for cannabis supporters, people we spoke to say Canada's move towards legalization is too slow.
It's a pot free-for-all at Vancouver's 420 celebrations. People openly using, buying, and selling joints and marijuana-infused cookies and cakes. What they're doing is illegal, but may not be next year.
It's 2 for $5, 4 for $10, 8 for $25.
It's too late. What? Why not now? Why not today?
The Liberal government is making good on a promise to legalize marijuana.
we will be introducing legislation in the spring of 2017 that ensures that we keep marijuana out of the hands of children and profits out of the hands of criminals.
The announcement came at the United Nations special session on drug policy. From the Liberals' perspective, marijuana is already falling into the hands of kids, so regulations are needed.
We know it is impossible to arrest our way out of this problem.
Still, it's a contentious issue, with conservatives warning of the dangers of legalization.
There needs to be a strong public health focus on making sure that kids and parents understand the impacts on the developing brain, and I hope that, the health minister does that.
Marijuana activist Jody Emery is worried the Liberal version of legalization will be too restrictive.
They've promised to heavily restrict, control, and regulate. So we activists are very concerned about what kind of legalization the Liberals have in mind, when really it looks a lot like the prohibition we've been experiencing for so long.
Emery is calling for little regulation and policing. She dismisses concerns over how law enforcement will deal with issues like driving while high.
And most marijuana users will not drive unless they know they're able to do so. And if they do drive, it's typically slower.
Organizers are calling this year's 420 rally in downtown Vancouver one of the largest in history. But while the city's love of this still technically legal weed is well documented, the Trudeau government's push for legalization is problematic for some. In particular, there are concerns about driving while high. UBC engineering professor Mina Horfar has developed a pot breathalyzer. We spoke with her earlier today and asked her why she was interested in breathalyzing bud.
The intention was not for measuring marijuana or to detect the pod in the breath. We developed this technology, in fact, to detect diabetes from the breath. And after 2 years that we made it successful, and it was very non-invasive technique, we had visitors to our lab and they suggested that, can it be used to detect THC, which is the molecule in marijuana? And we thought, with all the publicity and the legislation that's going on for legalization of the marijuana, this is the best time to do that. And that's why we changed the device, we enhanced it, make it selective to marijuana.
So how does this device exactly work? How does it measure, and how will it help better measure whether or not somebody is impaired by marijuana compared to other tests that have been done before?
Yes. So in terms of it's similar to other breath analyzers. It means that the person has to breathe out into a bag, and the bag is connected to the sensor. But what makes the device different, it is very selective and sensitive. As you know, breath consists of millions gas molecules and odors. And in order to make sure that the device is selective, that's the meaning of it, and we target exactly THC, for instance, then we have to have this polymer coating. After the molecules are segregated, then at the end of these channels we have gas sensor, which is nanofabricated and very sensitive, and here the sensitivity comes, and we can measure the THC or DAB molecule down to sub-ppm, parts per million.
Wow. So we know that in other similar tests, whether it be for alcohol or other drugs, that false positives are a concern when somebody blows into a device. How do you deal with that, and how accurate will this test be?
Yes. So false positive is the major concern with all of the breath analyzers. And one of the issues is that the breath analyzer outside, they are sort of affected by environmental changes, humidity and temperature. And that's one of the impacts that we were aware of it, and we fix it in our device. The other thing is that, as I mentioned, our channels, they're coated with that material. We segregate the gases and make them very selective. So a person can have other drugs or can also have alcohol in their breath and THC, and the device can differentiate between them and measure all of them, actually, in fact.
And lastly, Professor, how do you plan on testing this?
So right now in our lab, we have the test bed made of the synthetic, I call it, breath, which we made a breath with several gas compounds and THC. The next level is that we do the human trial or the clinical trial. And the reason we haven't done it because we need ethics approval from UBC Board of Ethics. We started doing that process. As soon as we get the ethics approval, we're going to have volunteers to be tested through this device, and then passing through the FDA and the health and safety. And we're looking actually through this publicity for law enforcement and police force, actually, if they're interested to collaborate with us, their help would be much appreciated, as well as investors to put them in the market.
Dr. Mina Horfar, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.